Imagine this. You're peacefully living on your property, minding your own business, when suddenly the HOA shows up at your door, threatening to call the police for trespassing. On your own land. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. It all started on a crisp morning. The kind of morning where the sun hits the pasture just right, and the cows seem almost magical as they graze lazily. I was enjoying my coffee on the porch when my neighbor's daughter appeared, phone in hand, snapping selfies with my cows. I waved politely, assuming it was harmless. But when I politely asked her to respect my property, she laughed it off. Little did I know, this innocent encounter was about to spiral into a full-blown HOA nightmare. A week later, I received a letter stamped with the HOA's official seal. They claimed I had trespassed on common areas they allegedly owned. Common areas? On my land? My jaw literally dropped. I reread the letter 5 times, hoping I'd misunderstood something, but no. It was all there in black and white. They even threatened to call law enforcement if I didn't comply. At first I thought, surely this is a joke. But then reality hit. The HOA was serious. They believed they had the authority to dictate who could step onto land I had legally purchased. I spent hours combing through property records, HOA agreements, and county filings. The more I dug, the clearer it became that their claims were not only weak, they were laughably absurd. Now, most people might panic here, hire a lawyer, or just quietly comply. But I'm not most people. You see, I happen to be a judge. And once I realized the power dynamics at play, I started thinking about the real consequences of their overreach. This wasn't just about property rights. It was about a group of people abusing their authority under the guise of an HOA. I decided I wasn't going to sit back and let them bully me. I began documenting everything, their letters, their threats, even the selfie incident with Keran's daughter, which, believe it or not, was about to become a key part of this story. Every detail counted because in court the truth doesn't just matter, it wins. By the end of that week, I had a plan. A plan that would turn the tables in a way they never saw coming. The HOA thought they could intimidate me, but they had no idea that the person standing against them could legally dismantle the very organization that was trying to harass me. If you think this sounds wild, just wait, because things are about to escalate in ways they could never imagine. And trust me, it all starts with a manure loader. After reviewing the HOA's claims, I knew I had to handle this strategically. I couldn't just storm in and shout, "You're wrong!" The law is a game of precision, and I intended to play it expertly. First, I called a meeting with the HOA board, partly to gauge how far they'd take their nonsense, and partly to record everything for evidence. The moment I walked into the room, I could feel the smugness radiating off them. They assumed I was intimidated, that I would fold under their paperwork and threats. Big mistake. I greeted them politely, but I could see their confusion when I pulled out my documentation. Every claim they had made, every supposed trespassing incident, was meticulously countered with property maps, historical records, and legal precedents. "Excuse me?" one of the board members sputtered. "But you're a judge?" I smiled. That moment of realization on their faces was priceless. They had assumed I was just another resident who would cave to their intimidation tactics. They didn't realize I understood not just the letter of the law, but also how to dismantle organizations that overstep their authority. While the legal side was important, there was another matter that needed addressing. Keran's daughter and her selfies with my cows. She had been carelessly wandering my property, snapping pictures without permission. I needed to make a statement, something unforgettable. So, when she came back the next day, phone in hand, I decided to photobomb her pictures. In the most dramatic way possible. Enter the manure loader. Let's just say the cows weren't the only ones getting attention that day. Of course, I documented everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. This wasn't just for fun. It was building a clear record of trespassing and reckless behavior on my land. And while the board thought they could intimidate me, every action they took was being carefully logged, ensuring that their overreach would eventually come back to haunt them. After that day, the HOA tried even harder. Emails, letters, and more threats arrived in my mailbox daily. But instead of cowering, I began drafting the official paperwork to dissolve their organization. I reviewed state laws on HOA governance, loopholes they had ignored, and the mismanagement that had plagued them for years. Every violation, every procedural misstep, and every instance of intimidation strengthened my case. By now, it was clear. The HOA had underestimated me. They thought this was just a neighborly dispute, but I was playing a different game entirely. I wasn't just defending my property. I was preparing to take the ultimate step, legally dissolving their authority. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be a personal victory, it would serve as a warning to any HOA daring to abuse their power. Things were heating up, and the battle lines were drawn. The HOA thought they controlled the narrative, but I was about to rewrite it completely. And trust me, the climax of this story is as satisfying as it is unexpected. The day of the hearing finally arrived. I walked into the courtroom with a calm confidence that the HOA had never seen coming. The board members, who had once been so smug, now looked tense, shuffling papers nervously as they realized this was no ordinary dispute. They were about to face the consequences of their own overreach, and they knew it. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors who had quietly observed the HOA's antics over the years were now curious to see how this battle would unfold. As the judge presiding over my own case, I had to maintain impartiality, but inside I was brimming with satisfaction. This wasn't just a property dispute. It was about holding a group accountable for abusing authority, intimidating residents, and attempting to criminalize behavior that was perfectly legal. I began by presenting the evidence. First, the property maps proving that every inch of the land in question belonged to me. Then, the HOA's letters threatening arrest, which demonstrated clear intimidation tactics. Finally, I revealed the photographic proof of Keran's daughter trespassing and my photobomb. A playful but pointed reminder that their claims were baseless. The room stifled laughter. Even the court clerk couldn't hide a smirk. One by one, I dismantled their arguments. They claimed the common areas gave them power over private property. I showed the statutes proving otherwise. They argued procedural authority, but I exposed their repeated missteps, from failing to hold proper meetings to ignoring state HOA regulations. With each point, their confidence eroded, replaced by frustration. They had no defense for their actions, and it showed. But the real turning point came when I addressed the HOA's culture of intimidation. I recounted instances of harassment, overzealous fines, and the threat of police involvement, all aimed at residents who dared to assert their rights. The courtroom listened intently. What they didn't realize was that this was more than a lesson for the HOA. It was a warning to any organization thinking they could bully neighbors into submission. Finally, I moved to the ultimate conclusion: dissolving the HOA. I outlined the legal process, citing statutes that allowed a judge to revoke an HOA's charter due to repeated misconduct and abuse of power. The evidence was irrefutable, and the motion was unassailable. The board members exchanged panicked glances. They had no idea this was coming. By the end of the hearing, it was clear who had won. Not only had I defended my property, but I had also sent a powerful message. Abuse of authority, whether in a government office or an HOA boardroom, would not be tolerated. The room erupted in applause as the dissolution order was signed. The HOA was officially no more, and I had emerged victorious, both legally and morally. But before anyone could celebrate fully, there was one more moment that would make this story unforgettable. That moment involved a certain manure loader and one very surprised teenager. After the court adjourned, I felt a mixture of relief and triumph. The HOA was officially dissolved. All the threats, intimidation, and nonsense that had plagued me for months were over. But of course, a story like this wouldn't be complete without a little flair. Enter Keran's daughter and the infamous manure loader. Earlier that week, she had returned yet again to my property, eager to snap more selfies with my cows. I had warned her before, but now I had an audience and a chance for some poetic justice. With everything meticulously documented, I positioned myself behind the manure loader, making sure my intervention was as unforgettable as it was harmless. As she crouched for a perfect shot, I slowly rolled the loader into frame. Her expression shifted from excitement to utter disbelief in an instant. The cows, seemingly aware of the drama, paused mid-chew as if watching the scene unfold. I captured the moment with my own camera, immortalizing the perfect blend of surprise, humor, and justice. No harm done, just a memorable lesson on respecting other people's property. Meanwhile, news of the HOA dissolution started spreading like wildfire. Neighbors congratulated me, not just for standing up to an abusive board, but for doing it with a combination of wit, precision, and authority. People admired that I had protected my land, upheld the law, and even managed to inject a bit of levity into a tense situation. After all, what better way to demonstrate control than by turning a chaotic moment into a humorous, memorable one? Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized this experience wasn't just about property rights or legal battles. It was about boundaries, accountability, and showing that no organization, no matter how official it appears, can trample on individual rights without consequences. The HOA had overreached, underestimated me, and ultimately collapsed under its own weight. Justice, in its purest form, had been served. Of course, the story also became a legend in the neighborhood. The manure loader photobomb became a cautionary tale for anyone considering disrespecting others' property. Social media buzzed with memes and jokes, neighbors laughed, and I quietly enjoyed the satisfaction of knowing the truth had prevailed. In the end, this saga proved one thing. Never underestimate someone who knows the law and has cows, cameras, and a sense of humor. The HOA tried to intimidate, threaten, and control, but they failed spectacularly. And as for Keran's daughter, she got a story she, and probably her friends, will never forget. Sometimes the best way to win isn't just with authority, it's with cleverness, patience, and a little creativity. And if you play your cards right, even a manure loader can become a tool of poetic justice. Thanks for following this wild journey. If you ever face an overreaching HOA, remember, knowledge, preparation, and a dash of humor can turn the tables in ways you never imagined. Enjoying this wild HOA showdown story? Hit that subscribe button to catch more real-life legal battles and clever wins. Also, give this a like if you loved the manure loader twist and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?